you don't get to pick your relatives. They get to pick you, or somebody does, and I don't have any influence over it. But I was very lucky because my grandmother, Maud Lane, Rogers Lane, was Will's sister. He had 3 sisters that grew to adults. There was Sally McSpadden, there was Maud Rogers Lane, there was May Rogers Stein, and those are the 3 girls. And then Will was the only boy out of the 8 children that Clem and Meyer America had children. And so I was a lucky one, and I'm still lucky because I'm 95 years old, and I'm the last of the great nieces and nephews of Will Rogers. He has grandchildren and great-grandchildren and a multitude of friends because he probably, at the time of his death, he was the most popular person in the world, I think, from the way everybody reacted to it. My nickname came really earnest because I was a tomboy. And my sister and I would be playing outside in Chelsea, Oklahoma. And my granddad had the corner Rexall drugstore in Chelsea. And so he was the pharmacist and owned the drugstore, so we could go there and get us a drink when we got hot and thirsty in the yard playing. So that's what we would do, and I always wanted a cherry phosphate. Well, that's an old-fashioned soda drink, all right, but then we got to having Coca-Cola that my granddad was using for medicine. And then they made a fountain drink out of it by putting carbonated water and Coca-Cola together and in a tall glass. And so I got to drinking those, and I said, this just doesn't seem right. So we started experimenting, and we put cherry Coke in it for flavor, and I liked that. So ever since then, I was known as Coke because I drank the cherry Coca-Colas. Well, he started out as a kid, and his dad put him on a horse before he was even walking, and he was then always a cowboy. And he always liked to rope. And he was taught to rope by this old colored fella, Uncle Dan, out at the ranch. And he taught him just when he was just little, you know. And then when Grandpa Rogers took him to Chicago they were selling cattle up there, and he saw a Mexican. I forget the Mexican's name, but anyway, he was a famous roper from Mexico, and he got to watching him, and then he went and practiced those same tricks that the Mexican did. And so he always, though, was more anxious to talk to people and have them tell him their stories than him talk to them. But he did have a circuit speech where he went to corporations and places and gave speeches and got money for them. And he also then became famous on the stage in New York, live theater. And then, of course, in Oklahoma, everyone knew him because his dad was famous under his own rights because he was a court judge for the Cherokee Nation in one of the 9 districts that there are. And so, but people just kind of felt like he was family. that's the way he would act around people. He never acted like he had a dime, and usually didn't because he'd already given it away to someone else. He was so generous and so loved by everybody. Of course, he got him in trouble with his rope when he was at Kemper Military. He had, I don't know, he said he lost about 8 ropes, and he even had them wrapped around him and his shirt on top. There at school, and they'd still find his ropes. And then he had so many demerits that then he went to Texas, and then that was when he did a real cowboy, because he did the cattle drive, and $30 a month and your board and room, and it was hard work. And then when he was in the movies, he would go out to the Texas ranch, at Ewing Halstead's ranch, and he would help them brand, and that's the hardest work he can do. And he was there every day, just bright and early, working those cattle and all. And one of the other fellows there, a regular employee of the guy, said, "Look at that, he's on vacation." Here he was, all sweaty and dirty and everything, and having a ball. And they were amazed that he would do that. And he built a one-room cabin and a corral, and that's when he taught Comanche to open the gate of the route. And so he was so tickled with that. And of course, Spike, that's his cousin, Spike Trent, and he was so mad at him because he didn't come in for breakfast that day, and he was out there playing around with the horse, teaching him to lift up the fence connection. And so anyway, then it turned out there was a prairie fire there a day or so after that. And they were out with the gunny sacks and wet and fighting the prairie fire. And Will saw it was getting close to the cabin, and he quit where he was helping out here, and he ran to the cabin, and Comanche had emptied the corral of the other horses. And they wouldn't come out, they're afraid of the fire. But he nudged them out and got them out, and he saved all those ponies. So that was quite a story. That fencing was about the worst thing, and the railroad. Those two things broke up big ranches, and his was big. But Grandpa didn't really own that land. He had the use of it by being Cherokee, and he could improve it or whatever. But it's still a lot of that was never under his ownership. Oh, well, that was his home, and he knew that the Cherokees had been chased out of Georgia and Alabama, and how that all came about. And his family were some of the early settlers, though, and they came over before the 1838 and 36. But he was never signed a ledger any place, or an entrance at a hotel or any place that he didn't write Will Rogers, Claremore, Oklahoma. He never gave a New York address or a California address. It was always just Claremore, Oklahoma. And I guess he would have written Oologah, but he always said Oologah's an Indian name. It's hard to say, and people just can't say it, so I have to tell them Claremore. That's easier. Oh, boy, he'd probably be talking about some of the things going on in the political arena, because there's plenty going on. And we're getting more people lined up to run for president, and he'd probably say that's the foolish thing, to spend all that money on campaigning when we just need one guy for the office. He kept telling them that everybody had been like crazy on a spending spree time, and that something was going to have to happen, and it will, because you couldn't keep on this borrowing money and spending money you didn't have ahead of the time. And so sure enough, that brought the depression. Then he kept saying he didn't think the wealthy people were doing enough because every one of them had bettered their life by the workers and the people that had helped them. And now those people were needing help, and they should help them. And that's what he kind of kept preaching. Well, I think he would have been very sad if he had lived through World War II. And, but he saw it coming, and he warned people, watch out for that bear, you know. And then the little guy with the mustache, you got to watch out for him too. So between Russia and Germany, why, he probably would have a lot to say. But his boys went to service, and his grandson went to service, and he believed in patriotism, and he believed that we ought to mind our own affairs and get people to pay their last war debt before they start another war. Oh, well, even just with children, when Dad would pick him up at the airport in Tulsa and take him wherever he wanted to go in the state, you know, he would tease us about the boyfriends and about what was going on, and was our team any good this year in baseball or basketball or whatever. And he just talked about normal things with everybody. You know, if he'd see somebody on the street, they'd say, "Hi, Will." Why, he'd stop and talk to them, and how's your crop, and how's the family, and that kind of thing. Aunt Betty gave him that pocket money every day, and at the theater, at the movies, he would drive himself in and all, and then there was always something going on, and somebody stopping, and they needed to have gas, or they couldn't get a job, or this or that, and he'd always pull his pocket money out and start getting it away. And Irene Rich was one of the actresses, and she played his wife often. She said, "If you want to get anything out of Will Rogers, you better do it before noon, because he is broke after noon." And one day he forgot, and he told them all, come on, I'm going to buy lunch, come on." He got them all there, and he didn't have a dime. He hadn't given it away. And so, you know, he had money, but it didn't mean a lot to him as money, you know. It was just what it would bring happiness to everybody. Of course, we all felt terrible about it. And we were just so lucky. We were living here in Bartlesville by that time. And my dad worked for the government, and the newspaper called us that morning and said, "Gunner, get down here. We're getting something over the AP wire, and you need to be here. It's about Will Rogers." So Dad got ready and he ran out the door, and then he came back halfway and he said, "Kids, get the radio on. It may be something about Uncle Will." So we turned it on, but it wasn't on yet. They hadn't even got it at Tulsa yet, so to announce it. So anyway, that was a bad day. Everybody was so great to each other, and a lot of love was shown. And he was so interested in pushing aviation. And he and Aunt Betty had been traveling in Europe on airplanes back in the 25s, you know. And he just couldn't wait for us to get good commercial airplanes. But he hired general aviation pilots and stuff to take him places sometime, because he always wanted to hurry. He always had to get back in time to finish a picture or start a new picture, because he had to make 4 pictures a year for one of the studios. And so he was always, when he'd come to visit us in Oklahoma, it was always on a hurry, you know, because he had to get back to do a picture. He always was wanting to see what's over there, and had an itchy foot, I would say. And he went every place, and he learned a lot, because he always asked so many questions and everything, and he really had a full knowledge of everything. He also said early on, Americans should be made to visit every state before they go to Europe. He wanted people to see what we have before they go exploring the history of the other countries. He thought that was important. But he loved to travel too, and always met all the people, you know, the royalty or the people, presidents of the countries and all. The memorial was built by Oklahomans. I remember in school, during that time, I think we took a nickel. Every child took a nickel to school to build that memorial. The government was going to allow some money to build it together, but they didn't come through. And so we decided, let's just do it ourselves, because we don't want to wait any longer. And so Oklahoma built the memorial, and I think that's the real legacy, that it was built by Oklahoma, and they're the ones that are keeping it up and doing right by it. Morally, he would be aghast at how these celebrities act. Also, he would not think the comedians of today are funny, because they use too much foul language. And he would think, that is not what we want to project with our kids. And he would say, clean it up. When Uncle Will would call and tell Aunt Sally or Estelle or whoever, or my dad, that he was coming, then we'd all get on the telephone and get all the people that could come and tell them where, and they'd all show up, as many as could, and visit with him, because he never had very much time. And so that way we all got to visit and be there together. And so we kids would be playing at my aunt's, and he would get his typewriter out and put it was a beat up looking thing, and he always carried it in his overcoat and his hat with him everywhere. So he'd put it on my aunt's pretty desk, and then he would type it. I mean, just like this. Oh, he went fast, I mean. And we kids would be playing and talking, and right there on the other side in the dining room, and he would be right there in the hall. He never said shh any time. I never heard him bite down the folks in the living room all talking, and so then he'd get the article ready, and he'd pull it out of the typewriter. Okay, kids, we're gonna go. And we'd all get in the old Ford, my dad's Ford, and get ready and go to the ice cream parlor and the telegraph office. And he'd go in and pay for a telegraph, and then he'd come out and we'd go to the ice cream parlor. Then he always liked to get a big sundae, he and Dad, and they'd sit over at a table. And then they'd just watch us, and we'd go on our way and pick out what we wanted to eat. And it was just really great because he enjoyed us and let us play and talk or do anything. We had no idea that was going to happen. No warning at all. And this truck drove up in the yard and started unloading this pony. And we kids ran out there, what is this? And they said, I'm told to deliver this for the kids. And so, okay, we're the kids, what is this? And they said, finally, they said, Will Rogers. So it came from Uncle Will, but they didn't tell us that at first. But anyway, he gave us a pony, and we had the best time with it for as long as we lived at my granny's. Clark Gable was one. Who else? Joe McCree was in his movies, and Spencer Tracy, and Barrymore. They would come to the ranch, and he helped build his own polo field. He would go to work, and by 4:30, I'm out of here, no matter what else was going on. And he would go out to the ranch then and get on a big old moving road grader, and he helped road grade and smooth that polo field and build that polo field. And they would come on Sundays, and whoever showed up, if they brought their horses, and some of them sent the horses ahead, and some of them just tabled them out there. But they would have their polo matches, and he was so aggressive, oh my, he was so competitive that he just almost scared the other guys, and so he always wanted to win, and he played hard. But what he did in California, he bought all the land he could right on the ocean, just right, stepped out of the water right on his land. And that made the Santa Monica Park. And he did that to have the public have a place to get to the ocean, because they were selling all this land, and it was being promoted by a lot of guys, you know, and resorts and hotels and stuff. And people were not ever going to get to the water and enjoy the ocean like he thought they should. Physically, kept himself physically fit. He got up about 4:30 in the morning, and they always had his horse tied right there to the fence. And he came down the back stairway out of his bedroom, and he'd get out and go ride and look at the everything and be sure all the stock was all right and everybody else. And he just had it was his peaceful time. Yeah. He had his favorite horses, and he had a lot of them, and he was always looking for another one, you know. But I think he really had soaps and rode him the longest and all. But Comanche was his horse for the first rodeo that he won, and he got that $14 prize, and he said he was never worth working again after that. And that it spoiled him forever on honest work, he said. He had his favorite rope tricks, and then he was always finding another one. And He was in a slight airplane accident. He didn't let anyone know and never made the newspaper. And he didn't let Aunt Betty know for a number of years what it caused him. But he hurt his right arm in the airplane accident. And so he couldn't use it to rope. So he worked and taught himself to use the left hand then. And so then after the right arm was well, he could use both. And so he could throw 4 ropes at a time or 5 ropes or something. And he was always learning a new trick if he could do it, you know. If people would just halfway live the life he did, why the world would be better.